It's 11:45, Nigeria. We either get it right or we fall off the brink. Hello and welcome to 11:45. Today I'm in conversation with Iyinoluwa Aboyeji, a 30-year-old technology founder and investor. Most known for being a co-founder of Andela, Flutterwave and Future Africa. And I also understand he is known as E. Everybody calls you...
Everyone calls me E.
E.
Yeah.
Why?
Okay, so I think I got the name when I was in Canada. My teacher couldn't pronounce my... Very much like you were struggling.
Yes.
And he was just
I'm
like,
struggling.
we'll call you E. Because we can't do this every morning.
Yeah.
So the name stuck.
Yeah,
Everybody's
the
like
name
E.
stuck. Okay. Co-founder Andela. Co-founder Flutterwave. Now Future Africa. It is a lot of things for a 30-year-old to have packed into this lifetime. How did you start thinking about tech as something that you want to get involved in? Where did that journey begin?
Yeah. I think what really helped me was I got in early. And also I got to learn from people who accelerated my journey. So to be very honest, I started out a very curious, child. I went to Loyola. Loyola is very, known
Loyola Jesuit.
Loyola Jesuit
I went to a
College.
Catholic school
Yeah,
too.
you know what it is. So
Yeah.
I think, I learned a lot there. I wasn't really interested in tech at that time. I got super interested when I went to University of Waterloo. University of Waterloo was an odd experience for me because it was this school, 30,000 students on the campus. This was the first time I was out of Nigeria. So I was just adjusting to a lot of stuff. But what the campus had was that, one, it had a huge entrepreneurial vibe. A BlackBerry was made on my campus.
Oh, wow.
And the founder of BlackBerry was a dropout from my school.
Right.
So, you got to see people making things. And I had this experience where on the first year of school, actually, I had this kid walk up to me and be like, hey, can I stay at yours tonight? Because my dorm isn't ready. And I was like, sure, come stay at mine. And we became very good friends.
And this was someone you didn't
know.
But you said yes to.
Yeah. It was, young kids. We didn't know anything. So we're just like, I met this kid at orientation and said yes. French kid, long hair. Who knows? So I brought him. He came over to my place. We became very good friends. But we lost touch because of cooperative education. What then happened was... sometime just randomly, I was running the school newspaper and I came up to grab lunch and I just ran into him and I was like, dude, where did you go? And he told me he went to Silicon Valley. So to be honest, if I hadn't met that guy at lunch on that random Monday or so, I would never have known that there was this entire world of my school that was focused on tech entrepreneurship, or there was something like Silicon Valley. I mean, I would see it like everybody else, But
because you went there to study law.
I went there to study law, right? I was running the school newspaper. I was president of the school newspaper. My path was very set. I was
law, but dabbling in journalism in school.
And
then being kind to offer a stranger a bed in your
my house. And then he introduces me to tech. And then, I follow him to Silicon Valley. We start a company together, booknetter.com. Company fails. But I follow him to Silicon Valley.
Isn't that though the standard story of most tech entrepreneurs? That a lot of the things they start out with fail.
Yeah. You have to fail like twice at least, before you're successful. So the first one, booknetter.com fails. But during that process, I got to learn about Silicon Valley. I was very inspired by Mark Zuckerberg. We watched Social Network together, all that. And that was how I kind of headlong went into tech. And I think at that time, because it was so early, the missing piece in tech was people who understood how the world worked. Like tech people understand how tech works, but they don't really understand how the world works.
And you think you do?
Well, to some extent. I understood it better than many of them, right?
Okay. How did you get involved with Andela? Because I think that's sort of the first major success. How did that start?
So actually, after booknetter.com failed and I graduated, I felt my reflection was I couldn't solve problems in Canada because I didn't understand them. So I'll go back to Nigeria where I kind of have a network and I can figure things out and then try. And I was passionate about Nigeria, so I wanted to solve those problems. So I came back with a company called, I came back to start a company called Fora. And Fora was supposed to be like a course exchange for university students. Again, tried to get regulatory approval. I think I overlearned the lesson of the first time. And then they told me no, I couldn't do it. The idea was, if you had a professor who was teaching at 5 universities, instead of him kind of traveling around 5 universities, he could just teach the courses online. And we would give him a tool to like help him manage all those classes.
But that was way before virtual.
Way before virtual
before
learning,
Zoom
COVID. We're a bit too early.
Yes.
So that was, I tried that. NUC said no. So I pivoted and started selling online learning courses.
At no point following this sort of 2 attempts did you think to yourself, maybe tech is not for me, go back to law or do something else? Or you sort of you were fixated and you believed that tech could solve a lot of problems and you had to keep working in that area?
I think for me, it was a bunch of things. I mean, to be fair, I came under incredible pressure, especially from my parents, to just go to law school in Nigeria and like go practice law.
They sound like typical Nigerian
Yeah,
parents.
exactly. My parents were somewhat typical in that sense.
Okay.
They just wanted the best. So I did come under that pressure. But I think the one thing that saved me was I had seen technology companies be successful in Canada. And I just refused to accept it wasn't going to be possible here. I knew it was possible. The question was, could I make it happen here? And so I just kept at it. And I just figured that what was wrong was the idea, and I needed to understand the market and adapt it to what they had here. And we had some limited success there. So Fora swapped over to become a platform for helping people who wanted to study online. Usually professionals couldn't leave their jobs for an MBA, but needed the degree. So we would help place them. Now, I had met a guy.
Is it still active?
No.
Fora. Okay, so Fora.
It's out. Lots of great people are doing the business now. But what happened was I'd met Jeremy, who became my co-founder at Andela, when I was coming back to start the first version of Fora. He had built a company called 2U, which went public. And it was, we call it an OPM now, online program manager. So they would go to a university like University of Lagos, tell them, hey, we'll build an online program for you, no cost, but share the tuition revenue with us.
Right.
So I was trying to do, because I was along the same lines of business, I met Jeremy and got his advice about how to structure it. And he told me, make sure your regulator's on site or etc. So anyway, I came back to him for one to say, hey, that original idea didn't work. And I have this new idea that maybe you can like be a pipeline for me, pay me for bringing you students, because he ran a bunch of universities, online schools and all that. So I was coming to basically pitch him and be like, hey, you can throw me some dollars, or you can be part of the business and, allow me to feed you students for your university. And he basically like gave me the biggest cold water. He was just like, look, we've tried this thing before. It doesn't work. And this is why it doesn't work. There's so much more demand for online education than we can actually allow spaces for. So there's no way I'm paying you because I already have students I'm turning away. Right. And then second thing he was saying was, at the end of the day, he worries that the cost of an online education, because it still has to be a high quality experience, is too high.
If you wanted that quality.
For people to pay upfront.
Right.
And that in Africa, he wasn't sure it would match the incomes they would receive.
Right.
But then we started on a long conversation around youth unemployment, and he been to Kenya and I seen what happened with immigration, where people wanted jobs. And he started talking about skills, like he's looking for a Salesforce administrator, but he couldn't find any in New York, and he was willing to pay 150 grand for it.
Right.
And he was like, well, my thought experiment was I could find somebody in Lagos that can do it. Do they have to be in New York to do it? And he was like, no, like if they can just get their job done, then we don't.
And that's fine.
That's fine. And that all of a sudden kind of led us along this path
light
of
bulb
moment was like, okay, we could train people to do jobs.
Now, how long from sort of conceptualization to sort of fully becoming functional?
It was very fast.
Did it take? Okay.
It was very fast because we were very hungry. I mean, like the team was like, we were looking for success. So I met Jeremy. I would never forget. It was March 22nd, 2014. And we launched May 19th, 2014.
So less than what?
Less than 4 months.
Wow.
Well, no, actually 2 months.
2 months.
Yeah, 2 months. We had launched the first class.
Immediately,
And there was
people
just,
sort of
people picked up
demand,
on it, right?
right.
A lot of people. The first class, we had 700 applicants to the program.
Wow.
The second class, we had 4,900 applicants to the program.
Andela has been hugely successful in some ways, but in other ways, not really. Because I
Yeah.
think part of the excitement when Andela came to the market was that you were going to help educate and give skills to an army of Nigerians who everybody hoped would make a big difference to the tech ecosystem here. What then happened is that companies abroad started giving them jobs.
Yeah.
And many of them left in droves after graduation. Others, even though they were here, were actually just making money,
Working remotely.
on whatever. Was this something that your model had sort of envisaged was going to happen? I mean, I know you said it started with you thinking, can I get you someone to do the job, or must they be in New York?
Yeah.
So was it always designed, was Andela always designed to provide labor for tech companies abroad, or was it what people like me thought was going to happen, which was
Yeah.
that you were going to help train
Yeah.
people
Locally.
for a local economy that will then
Yeah.
help ginger it up?
To be honest, I think both ended up happening in measured ways. Perhaps with a big slant to the export. We always imagined that only the companies abroad could afford to pay for the training,
Right.
which was why it was a time-limited program. It was almost like, hey, you only have 4 years to enjoy this. What I would say I didn't imagine was that people would want to continue.
Right.
So my thought was, okay, within the 4-year period, they would perhaps like to work with foreign companies and earn dollars or whatever. But that once they had skills and they were empowered, they would be thinking like me and be entrepreneurs and go build businesses.
Build businesses. Right.
And I guess that was the biggest kind of shock for me, was like not everybody is like risk-taking.
Well, some people just like the idea
just
of
like
regular good money.
Regular good money, yeah,
Yes.
exactly. So I think that was the biggest surprise.
Was it difficult for you guys to scale up? Because, I mean, many of us didn't understand, well, if you've done this successfully for this number of people and there's clearly demand, both local and international, why isn't Andela sort of doing it in such a way that both the local market
and the
and the
international
international market
market
can be served?
I genuinely think perhaps that was the biggest point of difference
Right.
for me, because I thought it was possible to do that. But I recognize what the challenges with trying to do that were. It would have required a massive investment in infrastructure.
Right.
I'm trying to correct that mistake by making the investment with Talent City.
Right. So have you exited Andela?
Not fully. I'm still a
Okay.
shareholder.
Okay.
But I'm not active in management or, you know,
Anything,
I'm
right.
at best an advisor, you know.
Okay. So how did you make the transition from investing in tech around skills acquisition to then moving into fintech?
It started with Andela. So because I was actively interested in turning this tide of everybody's essentially exporting talent, I started to look for local clients. You know, they hired one fellow. So I took it upon myself to like spend time with the accounts, because I was the one who was carrying this reputational risk of Nigerian clients on my back. So, but in that process, I started to learn more about their business, what they were trying to do, what challenges they were trying to solve. And I kind of got sucked in. Now, what happened though was, I think at that time, the bank wanted to go a certain way with the product, but the people who were building the product wanted to go a different
When you say
way.
product, you're talking about a payment system now.
Well, it
Or
was
what?
more like a payments product. It was a
Right.
payments product.
Product,
So
right.
so they wanted to go, like they wanted to build more on the infrastructure side. And I saw the sense in the way they were trying to go, because I felt like you really needed versatile. I went, so, and keep in mind, at this time, I was going to leave Andela anyway, because I had done my 3 years. I was either going to go to business school, or actually I was going to go to business school. There was no other way. It's like just, let me go to business school and get MBA. That was my goal. So when, you know, they came to me and I started digging deep, I thought it was interesting enough that I wanted to learn more. And, you know, I'd been given some time off to go prepare for business school. So instead of studying for my GMAT, I was spending all my time with these guys talking about payments and learning about payments. Anyway, long story short, I ended up going to Arkansas for 3 months to just learn about payment systems.
So what was it, a course, or did you go?
It was
hang out
more
with
like
friends,
it was kind of like a training stroke
Stroke.
accelerator type of thing. And I just went there, learned from FIS, one of Flutterwave's customers today, investors today, about payment systems. So I went and I just threw myself in it. And the more I learned, the more fascinated I became, and the more I understood what the possibilities could be, and kept feeding that back to my colleagues. And so we basically rebirthed the business in those 3-4 months. And we said, okay, look, what the continent really needs is payments infrastructure that can connect it to the global economy.
Right.
And if you can build that pipe successfully, you would enable a lot of other things, including all these young people to go and build businesses on top of that infrastructure, which is what's happening today.
Did you face any challenges in sort of putting it together? And if so, what were they?
There were many challenges. I mean, the biggest one was regulation. We weren't allowed to, on our own, build a payment system without a license. Right. But our hack for that was we basically went to a bank and said, hey, we will give you 70% of our revenues if you use our software.
Right. So that it was.
So it was a bank that was doing it.
They already had a license.
Yeah, as a bank, they're allowed to do whatever they like.
Right.
So they basically had a license. We didn't have a license, so we would just be the software. But instead of getting paid for the software, we would share revenue with them.
And I'll come back and talk to you about Future Africa. But I want us to digress a little because it's a sort of come up in this conversation. The issue of regulation and tech and sort of government policy. It's something that in the last sort of year and a half has come to the fore. I mean, it's always a point of conversation, but in the last few months in particular, with the shutting down of Twitter, with the CBN decisions around companies that are involved in sort of payments and selling all sorts of things online. And you've been part of that debate, some of it online, and I've seen some of the backlash that you've sort of received. So help me articulate what your position is regarding regulation generally when it comes to tech.
So it's two parts of the same song, basically. On the one hand, engage government. But don't assume that simply by engaging government in good faith, things will change. It's a foolish position to take. Right. On the other hand, bulletproof your business from government regulation and ensure that you are nimble enough to respond to it. And sometimes that means adopting corporate structures that are fairly more complex than you would like. It might mean, as in the case of many companies today, perhaps not residing in a place where regulatory action can impact you. And most importantly, it means building a Pan-African business and a global business as quickly as you can. Now,
before we dive into the details of that, let me ask you one simple, straightforward question. Does tech need regulation in principle, without speaking about the specifics of what regulation and which?
Definitely.
Okay, why?
It needs regulation because businesses need regulation, and tech businesses in particular need regulation because they're very powerful, and they control a significant part of people's lives. And if you leave tech to its own devices, it could harm people, right? That's it. What's important in regulation is to ensure the safety of the average person, not the revenues of government.
And you think this is where the Nigerian government is getting it wrong?
Absolutely.
Because if you sort of compare the way regulation works in other climes and the way it works here, what is sort of the biggest criticism with the way government tries to regulate here?
They look at the digital economy as a milk, as a cow to milk,
right?
As opposed to a plant to nurture,
right?
Right. If you're nurturing a plant, you weed it. It doesn't mean you hate the plant, but you recognize that if you leave weeds in the plant, it could harm the plant.
But tech companies all over the world provide regulation for governments, and even as we speak, for example, tech companies that are maybe American-based and had sort of tried and avoided taxes in the European countries.
Yeah.
They are being held accountable now.
Oh, yeah.
With governments in Europe saying, no, hold on a minute. You can't make money here and then pay, little or no tax, and you have to be able to sort of do this, do that.
Yeah.
How is that different from what the Nigerian government is trying to do? Or even on the question of, if you look at, like in the UK markets, for example, regulation cuts across multiple agencies sometimes. So if you're dealing with people's finances, for example, there's a certain degree of regulation that is required to protect people from charlatans and from basically people stealing other people's money. That sort of thing. So in that sense, how is what the Nigerian government is trying to do different from what other even more advanced economies are doing?
I think in two major aspects. The first one is, in the other countries, the effort for startups, I'm not talking about flutter waves or whatever, but for startups, is to help you bring you into regulation. Right. So the idea is not to find you and fine you. The idea is like, I kill you before you've done anything. Right. The idea is to say, hey, this is what you're trying to do. Or let me even hear what you're trying to do. Okay, well, this is what we can allow. So do this, and this one, please leave it alone.
Right.
But that's
so
not the way.
There's a holding of hands.
There's a holding of hands. Well, the regulator is your friend.
Let's take you along.
Let's help you. It's like a guard for you.
Right.
And for your customers. It's not a policeman, or policeman should really be guarding you, but it's not supposed to just kill you and walk away, so that's the biggest difference. But in other respects, right, the government needs to be clear about its goals. It cannot at the same time push a job creation, youth opportunity rhetoric, and then essentially tax the people who are doing that to
kill.
Kill the people who are building those businesses.
That kind of time in the world where everything is global now.
It's global, so it's not. You can't do what they did to get up. We should not be foolish to then follow them into that trap.
Right.
The fact of the matter is, Europe can afford to speak up now, but it was not today that Ireland started to be used as a tax haven.
No.
They have fed fats on that for years, created jobs for their people, built infrastructure on the back of this, and now they are now speaking out. But it's not today that Amsterdam started to be a tax haven for tech companies. You understand what I'm saying? It's not today that the US...
So you're saying that we're at an embryonic stage.
Very embryonic.
And the approach has got to be different. It's got to be about different. Nurturing and building before you can then assume the authority to tax. So what you're doing essentially is they're just going to stay away and they will still penetrate. Right. So, but you've sort of, again, at the start of this particular strand of the conversation, you said you believe in engaging.
Yes.
And what sort of response have you received to the attempts to engage? And I know this engagement is not only you. I know a few other people in that space that have sort of come out openly to say, yes, we will engage because that's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Have you received the sort of response that gives you hope?
I think it varies, There are people in the system that give me hope, and there's people in the system that worry me. but I think that at the end of the day, what remains to be seen, and what will give the ecosystem a bit of respite, is if there's a coordinated response.
Right.
So far, the response can vary from, why does tech need to exist?
No.
I'm telling you.
No.
I'm telling you.
You've got someone in government telling you, why does tech need to exist?
Yeah, why does it need to exist?
I'm outraged.
Right? So I'm telling you, there are people who don't believe that you should have these tools you do today in government. There are people who don't believe that.
That is worrying.
Yeah. All the way to, why should they even regulate you? And then you have to now be pitching them that, no. You actually, there can't be bad actors and blah, blah, blah.
Is the question then, therefore, that we end up with the wrong people in government and who sort of don't understand what they are regulating? And that is a problem.
That is exactly the problem. That many, I used to ascribe it to malice, which is why I said, don't assume that just because you engage, you will change. It will change. Because the mindset shift that's required from engaging is Herculean. Almost, I don't want to say impossible, but it will require a lot of leadership.
So, talking about leadership
Yes.
and sort of the absence of the right kind of people in government, you dabbled a bit in politics.
I have.
You were deputy director campaign.
Yeah, the
for
joke
Mrs.
was I was de facto director,
of
director general.
government. Right. What did that experience teach you about politics in this country? And we are now approaching another election cycle. So, with that in mind, what are your thoughts regarding sort of the run-up to elections in 2023?
Yeah, I learned a lot from that. I think of it as my MBA. The MBA I never did. That was the one I got it. So I literally left Flutterwave to join the campaign. So it was an interesting transition period for me. I think there were 3 big lessons I picked up. I think the first one was, for the first time I saw the country. I know that sounds like a weird way to put it.
I understand exactly what you're saying, but maybe for the sake of
because we
those
campaigned.
people watching us, you can explain what you mean.
You can say what I mean.
Yes.
I feel like a lot of us have an idea of Nigeria.
Or we think we know Nigeria.
I'm still shocked at what I learn every day about Nigeria.
Right.
Well, we think we know Nigeria, but Nigeria is a lot bigger and more complex than people give it credit for.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it's an interesting thing.
Okay.
Right? I don't know if it's good or bad. I just think it's interesting. It's the nature of the beast. And some ways it's good.
You did call it a beast.
Some ways it's
negative.
Bad. Huh?
You did call it a beast.
No.
And that has sort of negative connotations.
Forgive me. I hope I won't get in trouble with NCC.
No. I have very sharp ears. I kind of tend to hear things. Forgive me.
You know, it is a hydra-headed monster.
Thingy.
What we have to deal with, right? But I think I learned a lot. You know, so
you
on the
said
one
3
hand,
things.
3 things. So first of all, I saw Nigeria. I saw North, South. I saw all parts of the country. I saw what drove people. I saw what mattered most to people. I saw how people thought. I understood how people understand messaging.
Right.
That was the first thing. The second thing was I learned the power of campaigns driven by ideas in good and bad ways. I mean, so the power of ideas driven by campaigns, the honest truth is we spent the most time in our campaign on the manifesto, which sounds weird for anybody who's been experienced in politics, but we didn't know enough. And I have a box in my room. I believe the government is literally implementing in many ways, like our manifesto.
Right. They will say they are implementing their manifesto. But I said they will say they are implementing
yes, but I can tick off
some of them.
Some of the stuff. So I think ideas are powerful, and perhaps elections are a good time to put out good ideas. I think that was a good thing we learned. But I think the bad thing we learned was we treat politics as an isolated problem. But it's not. It's a symptom of a hydra-headed problem. And the hydra-headed problem is the lack of institutions and the rule of law. There were a lot of things that were done to us that were quite frankly illegal, but it didn't matter who we reported to, including how we were hounded out of the race. The electorates and what they value, because we all have a rosy picture of the electorate, and we believe that if we can run free and fair elections, Nigeria would change overnight.
Right.
And I think that election detoxed me of that view.
Right. So you think part of the problem is also the voters? It's not just about those who run for office. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I think it's a function of the values of the voters,
right,
and their understanding of what they need.
Is that their fault, though? If people have been pauperized over time, poverty has been weaponized, are you shocked by the fact that they may choose short-term gains over long-term gains, if you consider that for a lot of them, some of their needs are kind of immediate?
I don't think it's that simple, right? I'm not surprised about that behavior now. I was shocked initially, but I'm not surprised. I can see the logic. But the idea that elections are not a collective decision about where the country is going or needs to go, but about what is possible in the moment. I think that's the part that scares me.
Yeah, I
like
I
you're almost
understand
like,
that, but you're almost, when you talk like that, and I've had a few of us talk like that, it's almost like sometimes we do this analysis from a place of privilege.
Of course.
Because when your own livelihood doesn't depend on who you vote for, really. I mean, in the immediate term. Long term, it does. We're all connected. But I'm saying, that 500 naira you're collecting or the 5,000 naira may be the only piece of money you see in a long time to sort of go and buy food and all of that. So there's a degree of sort of privilege when people like you and I look at regular poor Nigerians and say, why are you selling your votes? Why?
No, but you see, I'm not worried about that average voter. I'm worried about the participants in the process.
I see.
Do you understand what I'm saying? So, for example, you're a member of a political party. You're not that concerned about winning.
Yeah.
You're actually concerned about how much money can you make off running.
I see.
Do you understand? And think about that multiplied by all the legislative seats you have to fill for a party, governorship, states, campaign officials, ward officials.
So are you now completely cynical about politics and elections?
No. I'm not cynical. And I think what happened, well, maybe I was at shortly after, but I read about American democratic process. And the truth of the matter is, democracy is built to be manipulated.
I hear you, yes. And everybody who can tries to.
So I think if you get into politics with that mindset, that look, the business here, it's not about the will of the people. It's about who can manipulate the people more.
Right. And your hope would be what? Those who manipulate the people more would have the people's interest at heart. And I'm here.
Well, my hope is that they have a vision of the future that helps everybody, not just themselves. maybe by virtue of.
Are you at all hopeful? Because I know you're also accused of being a perpetual optimist on social media. And people say, you're not realistic.
Yeah.
You sell hope where there shouldn't be hope. What makes you optimistic about Nigeria?
Because other countries have done it before. Again, when you see something, you can't unsee it. And I think that's the one thing people need to understand about me. My conviction comes purely by seeing. So I think I've studied how did America become America. And the journey is, we're literally in that journey today. Right? So my confidence is that a group of conscious, how does Uncle Abu say it again? Like conscious capitalists. I mean, what I mean is like people who are selfish, but smart.
When you say Uncle Abu, you mean who?
I mean Mr. Abubakar Suleiman, who is the CEO of Sterling Bank.
Right. Okay. Because
But I meant like people like him will always say. I always talk to him about these things, and he would say, at the end of the day, what you just need are people who are, they're the right kind of capitalists. So they understand that there are limitations to capitalism. Just so people,
they want to make money, but they understand that they have to build.
Yeah, they have to build a social safety net. And I think, if you look at American history, the Rockefellers, Carnegies, they got to that point where they were like, okay, look, I get it. We want to make as much money as possible, and we can manipulate democracy to do that. But
so here is, when we have this conversation, and at different points, every Nigerian would have had this conversation. Here's where some of the concerns that I raise with people who sort of talk like you and say, well, the Carnegie Mellons, the Rockefellers, yes, they were greedy. They were the robber barons. They built America, but they didn't have tax havens to take their money to.
Nigeria is the best tax haven in the world.
No, I'm just saying, we have a lot of our politicians taking our wealth and, squirreling it away.
Yes.
Where it doesn't even do any work. So even the benefit of them taking it and sort of putting it either in a business here or whatever doesn't exist. They're also not dealing with a global system where Africa is essentially still an extractive
Yes.
extractive continent, where there's a lot of people who rely on our dysfunction, for their own economies to work. If I think of something as simple as chocolate, and what will happen the day Africa starts using its own cocoa to sort of make chocolate, there are whole industries in countries that will collapse, and thousands of jobs will be lost. And so when you sort of think about what all that does for the continent, and in terms of the sort of manipulation, whether knowingly or unknowingly, that happens with some of our issues, does that not worry you in terms of just because this notion that if we're allowed to go on this journey, somehow we will correct, but we're dealing with forces sometimes that even go beyond our borders, and many of us don't understand them. So Islamic militancy is another example, right?
Yeah. So it worries me only to the extent that we're not united in our resolve to face those problems. And we have to start from a point of agreement. You understand? So if some people think those are problems and some people don't think those are problems, then that's not a good point to start.
That's right.
But the one we can agree with is this dysfunction cannot continue.
It's not working.
It's not working. It's not working for our businesses. It's not. If anything we've learned from the last 8 years, this thing is not working. We need to be more involved. The question should now be how. What has worked is that in other countries, businessmen have taken control of government and bent it to their will.
Right.
So you have an economy that works.
Businessmen in Nigeria, you heard it here, people. He's saying businesses in Nigeria need to take control of government.
They need to take control of government.
How?
Well, first of all, one of the things the journey I've been on since the election is understanding the structure of government. A lot of us just see the president. But there are structures of government that are close to us, but are invisible to us. The wards. I've been to a lot of ward meetings this last 2 years. I'm not a member I go to both parties and they know. I go to both parties' ward meetings. It's allowed. I'm not a member of either of them. You can go. If you're friends with them, you can go. I support candidates in both parties, so long as you align with my agenda. So the key thing is, first of all, we have to come together and decide as business people, what is our agenda for a peaceful and prosperous Nigeria? What do the people who achieve this for us, what must they believe? Who will they be? Then we need to make sure they are everywhere in the system.
Right.
After being trained and indoctrinated.
Right.
By people who teach them the basics of economics, who show them how societies work, etc. So we need to...
So a full departure from the way businesses have formally engaged with politics, which the way I know it normally works is elections come.
Yes.
Businessman A will take some money, give it to party A, give it to party B, give it to party C, and just cover all their bases. So regardless of who gets elected, as far as they are concerned, government will not harass them. They need to be a bit more proactive.
Very different.
I actually happen to agree with that.
Yeah. You need to raise completely new voices from the ground level.
Can it be done between now and 2023, in your view?
No. 2023 is gone. We can start
but
now.
There are those who believe that if we don't have a departure in 2023 from politics as usual, this country might not survive till the elections.
I don't believe that. We've been through worse. If you read
Let
history,
me remind you what we're facing, and then have you repeat.
Of course.
We've gone through worse.
Yes.
We're fighting a war in the northeast against a group that has been designated one of the most horrific terror groups in the world.
Yes.
Boko Haram. Northwest, what was thought to be regular banditry and rustling has essentially also become full-blown terrorism, right? The number of people dying, the number of people getting killed, kidnapped, raped, numbers are pretty horrific.
Yeah.
We were already dealing with agitation in the Niger Delta because of people who rightfully, in my view, feel that the country has let them down, even though they were sort of the major producers of our. Also, you've got degraded environments. You've got people who can fish, who can farm, who can't even drink proper water in their community, and they're angry, and rightfully so. The issue of the civil war, which we sort of never really grappled with properly and resolved, has come back to haunt us. Now the Southeast has also become some sort of killing field between secessionists who are carrying arms and government clamp down. The citizen has been put in a really difficult position, right?
Yeah.
And the Middle Belt, which has always been a hotbed of clashes between farmers and pastoralists, some of these other issues have also infiltrated that area. And so literally every region of Nigeria is on fire, dealing with problems that are complex because it's an intertwining strand of many, many things.
Absolutely.
And in the middle of all this, unscrupulous politicians
Yes.
who are taking advantage of the chaos
Yes.
with a view to advancing an agenda of some sort. And you say to me what?
Okay. My own understanding of history, right, is that we've come to this point many times, at least a couple times before, from pre-colonial times, right, till now. The problem with the other side's arguments, in my opinion, is that we don't really have much of a choice but to stick together.
Right. So when people say break it up, it's not working, let everybody go their way.
Okay, so break it up, and what happens to Christian states in the north?
Right.
Right? Or what happens to, like, are the jihad is just going to stop at their border?
I say, okay, now that they are no longer...
Now they are no longer part of the country. I'm not interested in the south,
right,
where the money is.
Right.
I'm just going to stay here, and if I can just govern my local government, there's no problem. Is that what they're going to say? I don't think so.
So you think our borders are too close anyway, and so this issue is going to affect everybody eventually?
No, I mean, my point is, you know, just like the old poem says, don't ask who the bells tolls for.
Yeah.
It's an existential crisis. And the only way we defeat it is by sticking together and being deliberate about the country we want to build.
Part of the things I've sort of read about you, when, you know, this your optimism, when you sort of, there are people who don't like it, that you're optimistic. And part of the criticism I hear sometimes is because you're a child of privilege. And that you're a privileged Nigeria, that's why you can afford, you know, to be optimistic about Nigeria. Do you have a response for people who say that about you?
Well, I'm not a big fan of poverty Olympics.
Right. Now that's a new phrase.
Yeah, I don't play poverty Olympics, but
what does that mean? What does it mean, poverty Olympics?
Well, I mean, there's this certain sense that, if you've never been through hardship,
you can't
have an opinion about it.
Okay.
And there are two responses I have. On the one hand, I'm not minimizing what people have been through.
Right.
But I think I have every right to hate Nigeria. When I was 15, I had to pick out my classmates' bodies on the tarmac of Port Harcourt Airport.
Yeah.
Because somebody wouldn't inspect a plane. So my point is, look, at the end of the day, you know, Nigeria does what Nigeria does. And that's not the first time. You know, throughout my life, I've had multiple tragedies. I lived in Warri, for God's sakes, right? People died in religious crisis. My father perhaps was kidnapped more than once while negotiating with militants. I've been in war zones, right? So I'm not saying this to say, please feel sorry for me, but Nigeria has done its share of damage for me, right? Second of all, we weren't always people imagine we were privileged. We weren't always privilege. I watched my father grow his wealth, which is
you watched him walk.
I saw him work and get to where he got to, which, to be quite frank, wasn't even where his peers was, because he always kind of dedicated more resources than his income should have allowed him to education, because he felt that was the only thing he could really give to us.
Yeah.
And so I went to school with the children of his bosses.
Right.
And to be quite frank, that education is perhaps the biggest assets that he has given to me, perhaps at a very, very, very extensive cost to his health and to his own personal wealth, right? So my parents are not very rich people. Nigeria has been good to me, but not in the ways people imagine.
Right.
I wasn't supposed to be in the situation that I'm in. I feel like the kind of person who should be in my position is somebody who got an Ivy League education. I went to what many consider a trade school.
Yes.
You understand what I'm saying? I had to work my way through school, do odd jobs, work summers, run things, do side gigs, to get to where I am. I've lived all sorts of lives. So I understand what it means to have plenty. I understand what it is
not
to be
have
in
a
need.
lot. I mean, I'm listening to you talk, and it's amazing to me that you're 30. You have founded or co-founded some of the biggest tech companies in Nigeria. Andela, like we said, Flutterwave, and even the future, Africa, which we didn't even get around to discussing.
Yeah.
Did you ever imagine that you would do all this by the time you're 30?
Oh, no. No, I thought it would take 30 years. So all of this is very, very jarring to me. I was just thinking about it the other day, Now it will be 10 years in tech,
Wow.
10 years this November. Because I started my first company.
Because better note was you were 19.
Yeah. So I've been doing this a while. And I thought it would take 30 years. My mindset was this would be the career, and I'll retire. And part of the confoundment I have is okay, now you've done all of this by age 30. What else can you do? But the good thing is I still have one more thing left on my roadmap, which is capital. So Future Africa. And then I seriously have to think perhaps...
So tell me capital. When you say capital, what do you mean?
So what I believe
Future
is
Africa, yes.
The Nigerian capital stack and the African capital stack is optimized for government.
Right.
If you think about money in the bank, your money in the bank does not build anything for you.
Right.
All it does is it funds the lives of politicians.
And bankers.
Are they not the same thing? One wears suits, one wears agbada. What's the difference? Anyway, I'm just joking. But my point is, that's all your money goes. So I'm trying to, and people know that. People can feel that instinctively, right? Because the money is not working for them. And so I'm on a mission to essentially say, what does it look like if we build an alternate capital stack that actually allows you to fund entrepreneurs building the future you want to see? And that's what we do at Future Africa.
I see you as a child of Christ.
Yes.
If that sounds, doesn't sound whatever. And the reason I say that is you went to Loyola Jesuit.
I went to Loyola.
A Catholic school. I had a Catholic education.
Yes.
So we have that
now I understand. Yeah, we have that in common.
Right. And so my question is really, how has that sort of influenced you both?
Yeah.
Not in terms of just work, but in terms of the values that you bring to your life, and is faith central to what you do?
Yeah.
But I also know your dad runs a Pentecostal church.
Yeah.
Right?
Foursquare.
Yes, Foursquare.
So you can report me.
So answer that question regarding how your education has shaped you and your values. And then I will ask you about whether there's a friction between the Pentecostal home life and the Catholic education. Yes.
So, I mean, there definitely, my education, I would argue, is 95% of who I am today.
That's what I believe too, to be
95%.
honest. I think St. Louis shaped me.
Yeah. And not just because I went to a Catholic school, because I went to a Jesuit school. It's different. We like to... And because, the motto of my school is service of God and others.
Yes.
So from day one, you were brainwashed into believing you were the chosen to serve Nigeria for
and
6
that your life
years.
has no value if you
If
don't,
you don't
serve
serve other people.
Right.
So and that is the ethos with which I work today. I have no other interests. And yeah, it's nice to make some money. It's nice to have risen this quickly. But for me, it's entirely devoted to serving God by serving others. And I considered the work I do service.
And Catholic education, like you said, brainwashed, molded. And then you go home to a father who's a Pentecostal pastor.
Well, keep in mind, he
there
was the one.
ever any
tensions
in sort of...
Yeah, I mean, on his side, I actually felt sorry for him, because you have to understand he was a pastor in a Pentecostal church, district overseer, and he sent his child to a Catholic school.
Did he receive a lot of flack?
I'm sure he got flack. Maybe he probably didn't share with me, but
Right.
as I grew and I got to understand how bold a move
That
was. And his point was just, this is the best school. That was it. That was the end of the conversation for him. I think for me, though, there were a few tensions. I mean, I did have to navigate the rituals because they're very different.
Yes.
The faith is the same, whether they believe it or not. But the rituals are very different.
Right.
So you have to be like, okay, well, I've been baptized, so I'm not going to come for your baptism. And then, at home, you're like, well, this song you're singing is not, it's not as firebrand as we would like it to be. And they felt like the way I prayed was a bit strange. Because I would stare into the distance.
So how
to
do you
reflect.
pray now? What is your faith? Are you a fully practicing Christian?
Yeah.
And which
fully.
church do you go to? Your dad's
So
church?
I go to a Pentecostal church.
Right.
However, my spiritual advisors are still Jesuits. So it's not like a mix and match. I think realistically, the denominationalism, which I'm actually not a fan of. I actually, I have spiritual mentors from across the spectrum.
Right.
I don't subscribe to denominationalism. And my father knows, I'm not gonna, it must be Foursquare, it must be redeemed. They believe different things from us. I don't really believe in that. So I still go to Foursquare. It's important to have a ritual. It's important to have somewhere you call a church, a home church. But I'm on the board of my school. Every now and then I would disappear to the Jesuit retreat center because I just need to be reflecting. At noon, I do my novenas. And I do my night vigils. And sometimes I disappear to different...
There's a fluidity.
There's a fluidity to it. And it doesn't take away from Jesus, which is at the heart of everything.
Right.
And so I just try to avoid the ritual and just stay focused on the Word of God and stay focused on Jesus. Because at the end of the day, that's what's key about all of them.
Now, religion generally, and this is not just Christianity, including Islam, but obviously because I'm talking to you, the focus is on Christianity, does receive a lot of flack for the role it has played, many say, in dumbing down Nigerian brains, in getting people to think that they can actually achieve things without working, just prayer and no work. And the Pentecostal church also gets criticized because it is big, it is huge, it is influential. And many people don't see it doing much to sort of change mind shifts around certain things. What are your thoughts regarding the role religion, the church, can play in nation building?
So I think a lot of the flack the church has received is deserved.
Ooh. That's a surprise.
Yeah,
I wasn't supposed to say that. Okay.
Well, because I think, so we got something wrong in the church because I think we kind of imported this American prosperity gospel.
Right.
That wasn't really for our context and so on, with, some of our fathers. But, and what that did for us was it over prioritized personal salvation over what in the Bible we call the gospel of the kingdom.
Right.
So if you hear us pray, we'll say, Give us this day our daily bread.
And forgive us our trespasses. As you forgive
Those
those
who
who trespass against us. And lead us not into...
But all that.
Yes.
But at the end, it says, for thine is the kingdom, right?
Yes.
And one of the things it says is, thy will be done on earth
as
it is in heaven. So Christians were given the gift of personal salvation, but they were also given a commission to establish God's kingdom on earth. Now, what is God's kingdom on earth? It's not religious rule, right? It is that you create a world that is equal, right? That is more equitable, where the poor can find justice, where the widow is able to live, where the orphan can find mercy. A just world, essentially.
And I mean, traditionally, if you sort of look at, say, the church in Latin America and in other parts of the world, it has actually played that role.
That way, exactly. The church in Africa kind of took a left turn, right. From that, your will be done on earth. This idea of establishing God's kingdom on earth. And the battle now is to bring the church back to that commission. In the Bible it says, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. And I feel like we've kind of went for and others will be added onto you. So
I know my Bible.
Yeah, exactly. Come and join us on Sunday and see. So what I'm just saying is the kingdom aspect of the gospel has been buried.
Right.
You understand? And we just kind of focused on the righteousness for money.
But so are people
gospel.
Like you in church, younger people now, making an effort for this reform to happen? As far as I know, I haven't heard of any sort of movement.
Yeah,
it's reformation, but
yeah, my belief, and to be honest, the belief of people like me is that it's not going to happen in church.
Right.
The church is not the vehicle for this type of movements, right? It's going to happen in life. It's going to happen. It's going to play out
the way people live.
So when I live my life, I consider everything I've done service to God. It's part of my ministry of establishing. And that's why we're very careful about the businesses we fund and the businesses we invest in.
Right.
So, Andela, whether they jackpot or not, we've changed people's lives. Right?
Impact.
Flutter Wave, 500,000 businesses. They can now receive payments from anywhere. We've changed people's lives. All the investments we do, that is the ministry.
Right.
The ministry is changing people's lives.
Not
on the pulpit, but in business.
It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you so much for having me.
And see you again next month for another edition of Quarter to 12. Have a wonderful day.